coastal forts that are part of a dramatic World War II story.
This site on the end of the breakwater here feels like the key to unlocking what all of this is about. That's what I want to get inside.
A vast complex that helped to tear a nation apart.
In so many ways that are so important to underscore, it really leads to the expansion, the entrenchment of slavery.
And an island fortress surrounded by scandals and cover-ups.
They destroyed the buildings, burnt the files. They didn't want people to know what happened.
Decaying relics and ruins of lost worlds. They were forged through years of toil and are now haunted by the past. Their secrets are waiting to be revealed. Near the Isle of Portland, which lies off the southern coast of England, is a place that has a dramatic past life.
It's a monster of a structure, solidly built, clad in metal, with all sorts of additions attached to the top and the sides of it.
This is a genuinely unusual structure. This was not one simple purpose-built structure. This has evolved perhaps over a century.
How is it linked to a prison on the island? At first glance, there don't appear to be many clues.
You immediately wonder what was kept out there. Why was it separated from the rest of the land?
This is an incredibly claustrophobic structure. It's hard to get in, and it feels like it's impossible to escape from.
The land nearby the building is littered with curious reminders of its past.
As you pan out and view the whole area, you see an entire series of structures. This is something that is the result of a serious engineering project over a long period of time.
There is clearly so much going on in this place in different periods of history, but just how it's all related remains elusive.
So what lies within that circular structure? And for what was it built? During the Second World War, thousands of US troops arrived here to prepare for what would be the decisive battle in the war against Nazi Germany. But strangely, the constructions here don't all appear to be connected to that epic story. Rob Bell has come to the island of Portland to investigate why this place became so important during the fight against the Nazis.
I've come across a good few old ruins and abandoned structures dotted around the island now. It's almost like you're going to bump into something hidden around every corner. And some of them look like they're as solid as ever, but others are on the brink of collapse, just falling to pieces.
Having obtained special permission to look around, Rob's now able to get a glimpse of everything up close.
Looking over in these buildings up here, in these rooms through the windows, there's some old light fittings in there, so there was electricity supplied at some point. Old furnace in here, look, left rusting away, clearly providing heat or power for some use, but it doesn't seem like there's any one structure or any one single piece of engineering that tells you what all of this was for.
But there's one feature that really stands out.
Well, this feels very, very different here now. I thought it was just another old abandoned ruin here, but this has a very different form to it. Look at this. Okay, right. All of this circular structure and this little raised platform here in the middle, this tells me this is some kind of gun placement. But not just any gun. Look at the scale of all of this. The gun on there would have been absolutely phenomenal.
During the Second World War, this place became packed with troops, and the eyes of all would have been firmly fixed upon the horizon.
The Nazis, they were sending E-boats right near the shore. U-boats were patrolling the area, and the whole region was right on the brink of the action.
The threat of attack was very real, because the German Kriegsmarine was targeting key naval positions along the south coast of England. The harbors here were filled with ships, all preparing for the battle that would, at last, turn the tide of the war.
What you would see are hundreds of ships, all packed into every available space. All of this, all of the men and the ships, are building up to the decisive moment in the war in Western Europe.
The remains scattered across the area show very few signs of that momentous event or the part they played in it. But Rob is fascinated by something else. Some of the structures here seem to belong to a completely different era.
What's curious for me is that even from here, you can see, looking up on the ridge of the cliffs up there, there are big stone walls that look like they date to way before the Second World War. So the question for me is, what were all those older buildings doing here? And did they play a role in making this area so crucial in the Second World War?
To find the answers, Rob is heading out to a structure that stands apart from the rest, at the end of the harbor's breakwater.
I've been around a number of the old abandoned sites in this area now, but there's one that I've only ever seen from afar. It's that one over there. And I've got a sneaking suspicion that's the one that's going to help expose the real story of what this whole place was about.
There is what looks like an old prison here, although it has obviously taken a battering and is quite badly damaged.
It's hard to tell at first glance whether those windows have been sealed up to keep people out or to keep people in.
Was it a quarantine site, or was it perhaps a prison? Why were they trying to keep it separate from the mainland?
Come and have a look at this down here. This feels like a massive clue as to what this whole place was about. Those are huge guns. I've been told there's a definite link between this site and the prison over on the island. But when you see artillery of this kind of scale out here, that tells me that this was some kind of fort. So what was the link to the prison then? I'm hoping if I get inside, I can find that out.
Helping Rob is Gordon Lepard, a local marine archaeologist. Like Rob, Gordon has never before set foot inside the fort. So this is his very first chance to get a good look at the interior.
Wow, this is certainly very impressive. Something I'd like if you can help me clear up here. I know there was a link to the prison with this fort, but what exactly is that?
What it was that the prison was built to supply the labour to quarry the stone, and they built the breakwater from there using the stone the prisoners quarried.
The fort has natural defences to the north, south and west, but it was still vulnerable to an attack from the east, a problem that the authorities in the mid-19th century recognised and were determined to address. They decided to build a breakwater, which, when it was completed, stretched for 1.5 miles.
This was a huge job, and they used the prisoners who were kept on the island to man the quarry, to create these huge blocks, to assemble these straight lines that cut out into the sea.
This once formed the largest man-made harbor in the world, and it provided superb protection, not only from enemy attack, but also from powerful storms.
I mean, when you've got a little bit of daylight coming in through there, is that what I see from the outside, those bricked up openings?
Yes, they would have been open, or at least with metal covers on them when they weren't in use.
Yeah.
But that was where the guns pointed out and fired.
And when we're talking about guns, are they the guns that I saw down in the water there? Almost like they'd been dumped in a pile or next to the breakwater.
Those are the breaches, just part of the guns that were here. They're the first guns that were placed inside the fort in the 1870s.
To defend the sea leading towards the harbor, 14 of these guns were placed evenly around the circular fort. But who exactly was the enemy?
What was the threat? What was the idea behind building this fort then?
When it started, there was a perceived threat from the French. They were fortifying their own coast. They were massively mechanizing their navy, and it was perceived that there could be a threat to the southern English coast.
Britain and France had been at each other's throats for years. And although there was peace of sorts at the time, there was this fear that a new battle might be emerging.
So the British decided to construct forts in English coastal waters.
You can see that at one point it was a well-engineered, thriving, purpose-built location with all of these passageways and tunnels having a specific use.
Oh, we're really descending down here now. Go and look around you though still, all these handrails just rusted away.
But this was just the first stage of the Isle of Portland's modern fortifications. Warfare was evolving, and Portland needed to grow and expand. As we'll see, every inch of the site had a part to play.
This is one of the rooms where the explosive charges were kept. Beside us, we've got one of the hoists. Several of these round the edges here. In would go the shell and the charge and the fuse, and they would be hoisted up.
Well, what's the idea of separating the shells and the munitions down here from the artillery, from the guns up above?
If you had an explosion up on top, you did not want the explosion to come down here. It would be a disaster if the explosion was to get through to one of the shell stores.
While the breakwater fort was central to the defense of the area, it was far from the only piece of the puzzle. Other fortified defenses were also built, making it one vast engineering project. But when it was all completed, there was a harsh reality to be faced.
Military technology was advancing at such a rate around the turn of the century that by the time you built something, it was already out of date.
These forts, they were built as a reaction to the threat from the French. They took decades to build, and in fact, when they were finished, they were an embarrassment because the threat had moved on.
Why would this place, an apparent relic from a previous century, soon end up being chosen to play a vital role in the Second World War? The first clues can be found on the roof of the fort.
What we've got feels like it's a gun turret, and it looks like it's almost replicated over there. But what strikes me is that this seems way more modern than the fort down below.
Oh, it is. The fort itself was built in the 1870s, but it's been constantly updated. You can see there are lots of different periods, culminating in the Second World War, when one of these two emplacements had the last really active gun, the Bofors gun, during World War II.
In 1940, Hitler's armies, using the terrifying new tactic of blitzkrieg, smashed their way through Western Europe. Suddenly, the south coast of Britain was very near the front line.
In the harbour, you had large targets for bombing attacks. You would have had guns here bolted down where you can see the fittings today. The barrel pointing up into the sky, essentially as an anti-aircraft gun protecting the harbour.
But how would the area's old defences withstand what seemed to be an inevitable German attack? Now back on dry land, Rob Bell has come to Blackner Fort to see how everything was made ready.
So I'm up on the cliffs on the west side of Portland here with another enormous gun emplacement. And installations like this, as well as a whole range of other defensive structures, were found right along the south coast, forming a strong defensive line.
From the end of the 19th century and through the years leading up to the Second World War, improvements and modifications were made to the harbour and the areas beyond. The breakwater was extended, artillery positions were added, and supporting forts and batteries were built further along the coast.
These sometimes Victorian, sometimes First World War structures received upgrades so that are now capable of dealing with the threat that the Germans posed. It was feared that that Nazi attack was imminent.
In the summer of 1940, Battle of Britain, Portland was in fact an important target for the Luftwaffe. Ships were sunk within the harbor. Portland was also under repeated bombing attacks during day and night raids from German medium bombers.
It was the mix of structures and the solid additions to the breakwater fort that made Portland so effective when it was finally called into action.
What you see is an evolution in this one location from the mid-19th century into the mid-20th century. And rather than you get rid of these massive stone armored structures, you adapt them.
In June 1944, the battle that the Isle of Portland had been anticipating finally arrived. But the role it was going to play was an offensive one. And it wasn't Germans that were landing here, but Americans. It was chosen to play a key part in the largest invasion in history, D-Day.
This place had everything it needed right from the start. Its location gave it this barrier of the beach down one side, and then the quarry for the rocks to build the breakwater on the other. It had incredible foundations of defense all around. So add to that the upgrades it received. You've got yourself a place with the infrastructure it needed to handle the incredible responsibility for what was to come.
From here, many of the 1,000 ships that made up Task Force O made their way across the channel to take the fight to the Germans at Omaha Beach in northern France.
Thousands of troops lined up to board those ships. All of them, no doubt, anxiously waiting that command to go to filter down from the powers above. It's just impossible to imagine the emotions they must have been going through.
Here, they were in the relative safety of the confines of this well-defended harbor. This place was all about defense, but that also made it the perfect site for the launch pad on D-Day.
In the West, this is the moment of World War II. If the Allies can directly attack the main force of the Wehrmacht on the continent of Europe and defeat it, the Nazi regime will be brought down.
When that order finally came on the 6th of June, 1944, all of those ships sailed out past the fort over there. As Eisenhower's order stated, the tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory.
After the war, with the Nazis beaten, the breakwater fort was gradually stripped of its weapons, and it was eventually locked up for good. Today, the harbor is primarily used for commerce and leisure. But the grand old structures remain, still standing, and proud of the vital part they played in bringing peace to the world. In the heart of America's deep south, on the banks of Autauga Creek, are aging remains with an enduring legacy.
This is a site near Montgomery, Alabama that looks completely out of place.
It's dominated by this industrial complex, which makes it resemble more like a mill town in northern England.
As much as you see these industrial buildings, it's very hard to ascertain exactly what these buildings were used for.
The sheer scale of the operation suggests that whatever was made here was of great value.
A tunnel leads you down to the water's edge, and there you encounter the immense power of the river.
Clearly there was a connection between the river and what was going on in this complex.
Inside, few signs of this site's former glories seem to have survived.
It's amazing to imagine that this quiet, vast area would have been bustling with noise and chaos of machinery in action.
Huge voids fill the warehouse buildings. This was clearly part of a major industrial effort at some point. Now it's empty offices, abandoned desks, typewriters, papers strewn everywhere.
It seems like the place was suddenly evacuated.
Up on the hill behind the complex, there are more hints about its past.
An eerie cemetery overlooks the vast property below. 2 Confederate flags stick out of one of the gravestones.
The fact that there are Confederate flags make you think that there's a connection to the Civil War, to sort of the bloody conflict that ripped the country apart.
So, what was produced here? And what role did it play in the terrible war that scarred the soul of a nation? Anne Bootwell is an Alabama historian fighting to preserve the extraordinary structures that provide a window into a lost world.
I tell people when you lose a building, you lose the opportunity to tell the story of the people who lived and worked in those buildings.
The man behind this particular site had a profound impact on the southern United States. What he made here would help make America's economy the most powerful in the world, but also divide the nation like never before.
Daniel Pratt arrived in Alabama from New Hampshire in the 1830s, and he is literally one of the South's first industrialists.
At that time, Alabama was pretty much still wilderness areas, and he felt that he could provide jobs and a better lifestyle for the local people. But he was a visionary.
So he's building a complex of the scale and size that people in Alabama would not have seen before. And he is building it so that he can produce one of the most important machines of the early 19th century.
Surely not even Daniel Pratt could have imagined the wealth his machine would generate, or the destructive impact it would have.
Initially, Pratt came to Alabama just with the sole purpose of building and selling cotton gins.
The cotton gin revolutionized cotton farming because of the speed at which it could comb the fibers out of the seeds.
This machine can actually process 50 pounds of cotton as opposed to 1 pound, doing the whole process by hand.
Originally invented by Eli Whitney 4 decades earlier, the machine's true potential was only fully realized when Pratt spotted an opportunity in a growing market.
Whitney first patented it in 1794. He wouldn't see much profit from it, oddly enough, though by the middle of the 19th century, cotton would become the single largest export of the United States.
Before long, Pratt's empire was rapidly expanding.
The gin company that he built became the largest gin factory in the world. He was shipping cotton gins to France and Russia.
It underscores why Pratt is one of the first major industrialists in the South.
Pratt was so successful, he built an entire town in the image of his New Hampshire home to house the ever-increasing workforce. He even named it after himself. His fingerprints can be found all over Prattville.
Absolutely, it was Pratt's town, and most of the people worked in his industries and went to the churches that he built and the schools that he provided. The town of Prattville was held up as an example for other southern towns to follow.
So there's a uniformity, there's a sense of something, again, sort of evoking New England that was sort of purposefully built and created by Pratt in terms of the vision that he had for Prattville.
Yet, while Pratt's machine was creating jobs and prosperity in Prattville, it was having a very different impact on other people's lives.
Ironically enough, it was this very modern invention, the cotton gin, that created a demand for an older and more traditional form of labor, slave labor.
Up until then, cotton seeds had to be separated from the fibers by hand. Now, machines sped up the whole process. Increased productivity meant that the demand for southern cotton laborers skyrocketed, labor that was provided by slaves in the field.
Cotton is a crop that doesn't exhaust the soil so much, and by creating a machine that cleans it more rapidly, the cotton gin literally enables the expansion of slavery into the Deep South. Pratt manufactured a machine that not only revolutionized slavery in America, but entrenched it.
A devout Christian from the North, Daniel Pratt wrestled with the clear conflict between his deep religious beliefs and his personal ownership of slaves. The dark shadow of a looming war meant that it was a dilemma he'd soon have to resolve. The family graveyard that overlooks the old factory reveals which side Pratt eventually chose.
He's a Northerner in the South, so he argues against secession, perhaps out of a commitment to union, but ultimately when the South secedes, he throws his hat in with the Confederates.
There was even a military company named after him, the Prattsville Dragoons, which he supplied with artillery. The factory also supplied textiles, which would be used in Confederate uniforms.
The fighting during that terrible conflict took place mainly on southern soil, and inevitably it eventually found its way to Prattville. It threatened the very survival of Daniel Pratt's cotton gin factory.
We do know that there were troops in this area, but we have been puzzled to this day as to why Pratt's industries were not destroyed. We don't know if that was because he had some influence, because he was a Yankee, or what caused the Union to leave his industries alone.
Whatever the reasons, Pratt's complex was undamaged by the fighting. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said of his finances.
The people that had worked in his factories, especially those that had sold his products across the South, were called to serve in the military.
And because of the war, blockades were put in place, and Pratt wasn't able to export his gins, and that had a massive impact on his business.
And worst of all, he was paid in war bonds, in Confederate money that would eventually be worthless.
The war is very costly to Daniel Pratt. Some scholars argue that he lost about $500,000 and that the war comes close to ruining him financially.
When the Civil War ended, the prospects for Pratt's cotton gin business looked bleak. Faced with the harsh realities of post-war reconstruction, how would the factories and town they built survive?
It took him quite some time to get his industries restarted and get the production levels up. He was determined to do that, and he was eventually able to recover that well.
In fact, Pratt somehow not only revived his own business, but he also helped to speed up Alabama's economic recovery. That meant there was a future for people like Ernie Edwards, who worked here well into the 20th century.
When we were very busy and cotton was at a peak price-wise and machinery was selling very well, the We might have 3 shifts running in here.
But sadly, it didn't last. In 2009, the vast halls fell silent for the first time in more than 150 years, as the business struggled to compete in a fast-changing economic market.
I miss the people more than anything else. And it's sad to go through that plant and see the condition that it's in. I'd like to see the industry come back.
Locals are fighting to save what remains of this important historic site. It still faces an uncertain future.
It looks like it's going to be converted into apartments and office spaces rather than being torn down entirely. So at least the distinct architecture and some element of the history of this site will be preserved, one hopes.
In the heart of the Mediterranean Sea sits the lovely island of Crete. Tucked away in one of its bays is a tiny but very dramatic islet.
It's such a beautiful island. This is paradise.
But as you approach, these foreboding walls loom over you.
And now it starts to take shape that this is a fortress, and a strongly built one.
So it looks like they were defending themselves from an outside force. Or perhaps they were trying to keep those on the island in.
Inside the outer walls, cavernous walkways and tunnels lead to a mixture of ruined stone buildings.
So who lived here? And did they interact with the people on the mainland?
Back then, it was forbidden for anyone to visit the island. The truth is, by the afternoon, I couldn't wait to get out of here.
This island has become famous now, yet little of the truth is actually out there.
And when you learn about it, you see that the government had tried to cover it all up. What was the secret of this place? And why did the Greek government try so hard to convince people that it didn't exist?
These imposing walls were built by the Venetians back in the 16th century, and they were part of a fort. But as time went on, these walls became used for a slightly different purpose.
This island, up until the 1900s, was inhabited by the Turks. They wanted to drive the Turks from the island, so that's why they decided it would be a good idea to bring the lepers here, so the Turks would go away.
After that, a Danish doctor decided to use the island as kind of an experiment, a clinical trial.
That Danish doctor was the seemingly all-powerful Edvard Ehlers.
He believed, like everyone at the time, that leprosy was contagious and that after 10, 20 years, when all the lepers had been sent here and died off, the mainland would be free of leprosy.
This is Spinlonga. It would eventually become part of an infamous government cover-up. Greek lepers were once rounded up and deported here.
Even the most beautiful place, if you are imprisoned within it, can turn into a horror.
So how did this island paradise become a place of nightmares? And why did the authorities want to hide its secrets?
These lepers had bells strung round their necks to warn the healthy they were near. And when they arrived, they were faced with an imposing entrance. This one, designated for lepers, was nicknamed Dante's Gate, in reference to hell.
One story goes that a wife couldn't bear to be separated from her husband, couldn't bear to leave him, to have him deported there by himself, that she actually injected herself with his blood so that she became infected with leprosy as well.
Leprosy sufferers here lived in harsh, almost inhumane conditions.
It was around 1910 when a girl, a young woman that was about to get married, was diagnosed with leprosy. They brought her here, but at that time, life here was extremely harsh.
Shortly after arriving, she was raped. So what she did was she took herself up to the tower and committed suicide. She would rather be dead than live on the island. That's how horrible it was.
But Dr. Ehlers did little to alleviate the suffering. He offered no treatment or medicine. He even prevented news reports of potential medical cures from reaching the leper community.
From then onwards, everyone was out for themselves. Everyone would only see to their own needs, and if they had to step on someone else, they would.
So what became of the lepers here? When writer and anthropologist Maurice Bourne first visited Spinlonga in 1968, it was no longer a leper colony, and the island was closed to outsiders. He made it his mission to reveal the island's dark past.
When I was here in Crete, whenever I would go through the archive records, Remondakis' name would keep coming up.
Bourne decided to seek out that man, Epaminondas Remondakis. He tracked him down to a leprosarium in Athens, from where Remondakis began to reveal the secrets of Spinlonga. He started with his own remarkable story.
He had leprosy from the age of 12. His family helped him escape Crete for Athens, joining his brother, using the big city for cover, trying to blend in.
He tried to get an education, so he would truant from school or move schools so he wouldn't be found out. And he did manage to graduate from high school and even got a law degree. But then one day, his secret was discovered.
His arrival in 1936 would have a dramatic effect on the island.
One of the first and only lepers who could read and write, he was asked by the others to try and lead the community, to organize them and help create better living conditions. So Remondakis formed a society, the Brotherhood of the Sick.
First, they created a set of laws and tried to get the whole community working for themselves and for each other. They cleaned streets, painted the houses, organized games and music. And once they had gotten their own community in order, Remondakis started writing letters to the outside, trying to change people's image of what leprosy was and trying to campaign for better treatment for the people stuck in this veritable prison.
Remondakis and his brotherhood were determined to escape their island prison and return to their families. Dr. Ehlers was, however, far from pleased with what was going on.
The director of the leprosarium tried to put an end to all this. He tried to quash any hope amongst the residents, and he forbade them from intimacy, but that failed. The residents fell in love, they had families, and they even had children.
The Greek Orthodox religion, with its strong emphasis on family, was something even Dr. Ehlers could not overcome. And anyway, times were changing.
In 1937, a team from Athens, including nurses, came to take the children away to a newly formed orphanage in the capital.
Now, surprisingly, the lepers accepted this because, like any parent, they wanted the best for their children. And they thought the best lives for their children would be away from this island in a city where there was proper health care and just the opportunities that a big city brings.
In 1941, just a few years after their children had left, a cure for leprosy at last became available. It seemed that the long years of suffering were finally coming to an end.
So the cure did not arrive here on the island until 1948. Then, after 6 or 7 months, everyone was cured. But neither the state nor the locals, who were making an income out of the island, wanted the lepers to leave, or for Spinlonga's leprosarium to be closed down.
Still shunned by both state and society, the lepers were held here until 1957, a full 16 years after the cure was available to them. It was the final leper colony in Europe to close. It was then made out of bounds to the public. For 2 years, Remondakis worked with Bourne to bring the island's dark story to the wider world. But when Maurice returned to the island in the 1980s, he was surprised to find someone had already been there. Someone who had been trying to destroy the evidence.
I can tell you that when I was here on the island, all of the archived records were here. They were all scattered on the pharmacy's floor. Unfortunately, I did not steal any of them, because now everything is lost. All of them. No trace of the records exists anymore. Everything was burned in the 1980s.
But the operation here went way beyond simply burning files.
And so it happened. Everything that was specially built from the 1930s to the 1940s was destroyed. And the records I'm telling you about were burned. So today there are not many things left.
Bourne believes it was all part of an official cover-up.
But the state would lie to the World Health Organization. They were making up numbers, concealing the truth, lying.
Ironically, the mysteries of the island, with its rumors of a cover-up, simply served to increase interest among tourists, helping it to become one of the most visited historical sites in Crete. Despite the destruction of so much evidence, Spinlonga has a powerful legacy which lives on, in no small part, thanks to the work of Epaminondas Remondakis.
He died in Agia Varvara Leprosarium in 1978 from a heart condition. Until the end, he was still fighting for lepers' rights. I lost not only a good friend, but one of the most original and sincere people I have ever met in my life.
Now they are abandoned, crumbling ruins. Many remind us of dark times, but some were once beacons of hope and progress, lasting testimonies to human imagination, enterprise, and spirit.